I just wish I could have closed my ears, closed my eyes, put my head under the covers, and wish that it was just all a bad dream.
I'll never be able to live again in the illusion of safety. I live in a universe so vast, I don't even have a clue what's out there. And somehow it's connecting with me, making contact with me.
I know something very powerful, very meaningful, very important has happened, not only for these people, but for the world we live in.
This is about how people have been touched by an alien, and it isn't an easy story. It's not like touched by an angel by any means.
Yeah, those TV shows always end up with a happy ending. And this doesn't have an ending. This is open-ended, and it's very uncomfortable.
Welcome to Heathrow Airport, London. We thank you for flying with us.
Dawn, London, England.
We ask you to stay seated until the plane has come to...
How did I find myself here?
Turned off the seatbelt sign.
I've been following this woman around. She claims she's been abducted by aliens. I know she's not the only one. Hundreds of thousands of people all over the world claim similar experiences. I invited my friend Andy along to shoot. He hoped to be the first person to catch the aliens on film.
Andy, you should probably be shooting this. Here.
But me, I never even thought about aliens. I certainly didn't believe in them. It all started a few years ago. John Mack, a Harvard psychiatrist and leading researcher in alien abduction, invited me to a dinner where a few of these so-called abductees were speaking. I was skeptical, but I'm not one to turn down a free meal. This woman was one of the presenters. Her story moved me. I didn't think I could figure out the origin of these bizarre stories, nor did I think I could prove or disprove the existence of aliens. Rather, I was driven to explore the human drama. Who are these people? What has happened to them? And why does this distinguished Harvard professor believe them?
Born in Florida, raised there for 18 years. I have a typically American dysfunctional childhood, I think.
We were poor, and my mother was married and divorced several times. Like most people in Florida,
I voted to the right. It was conservative, you know, listened to Rush Limbaugh, all that stuff. And then the experiences sort of unleashed themselves in full force, and I started changing on a daily basis. You know, from one day to the next, I just was not the person that I had been the day before. I'll tell you about an experience that I don't think I have told you, that I don't tell many people, because this, I think, is actually my first experience.
it happened one night when I was around 26 years old.
It was 11 o'clock. I was going to bed earlier than what I wanted to be going to bed. And as I was going down to sleep, I thought, there's a blue light coming through the blinds. And I thought, I wonder what that is. And I just went to sleep immediately. I woke to my body vibrating as if I'd stuck it in an outlet. It happened about 4 different times in the morning on half-hour intervals. I was being like what felt like electrocuted practically. And I finally, the last one finally stopped, and I got up and I tried to shake it off, and I just knew something really wrong, something just not right had happened to me. 6 months into my experiences that included all sorts of really weird things, channeling, out-of-body experiences, just was going berserk. What in the hell is happening to me? And I just sort of sent this cry out to the universe, that to whomever is responsible for this, whatever is going on, you know, am I having a psychotic break? Is this a hallucination? Please, universe, if this is happening, you need to give me really physical, really tangible proof so that I can at least accept that it's happening and move on with my life. Be careful what you ask for.
Why me? What is this about? I want to get that connection back. I want to get back to those people. My connection with the extraterrestrials, it's deeper than any spiritual connection I've ever had with God. I want to have that connection again, and I want to do anything I can to get there. You know, and if it takes leaving home, leaving my marriage, leaving my wife, that's what I want to do. At least that's what I believed when I was going through the experience.
Peter was totally unlike any other man I'd ever been with. And I really liked him because of his strong connection with his family. I felt that he was really grounded. He took his work really seriously.
I was in love with her. I'm still in love with her. But it was as if she opened my heart, I think, for the first time. I mean, I'd been with many women, but my heart was never open like it was with Jamie. And I knew that I could go on this adventure of life with her.
So between 1986 and 1990, my wife and I lived in the British Virgin Islands, managing a hotel. And while we were down there, approximately 1988, I woke up one night in the middle of the night and got up to walk across the living room to go to the bathroom, which, you know, wasn't nothing unusual. And I found myself stopping and looking at this being that was standing in my living room and saying, "Stop this, I hate this, get away from me." And the next thing I know, I found myself lying down on the couch and a white light hitting me in the forehead and feeling paralysis. And waking up the next morning and being very afraid and very freaked out and somewhat traumatized, to use that word, and then telling Jamie.
He was really upset. And actually, as I recall, that was the time that I thought you were crying. I mean, I felt like he was visibly shaken enough that there were tears in his eyes, and I had never seen him like that before.
So I'm in bed, sleeping, and I get this tickle on the back of my head that feels deliberate, but I'm thinking somehow I must have just gotten myself up against the headboard too far. Started to go back to sleep, and again, tickle on the back of my head, like a little finger. That was all it took. And I just kind of froze, and I think I stopped breathing for a minute, and I got really panicked, and then boom, blackout. Wake up again. 2 minutes later, arms now down to my side, body paralyzed with this very physical electrical feeling running up and down it. Not just paralyzed, can't move. Electricity running through my body. Vroom, vroom, vroom. Totally scared, going, what in the hell is going on now? I can't open my eyes, and I feel a footstep on the end of the bed. I have big down comforters. It's squishy. What in the hell could be on the end of the bed? Is it a cow? I mean, like, the brain just goes through these really weird things. It's not a cow. It's, you know, is it a dog? Is it a cat? No, I don't have a dog. I don't have a cat. Is it a baby? I don't have a baby. Is it a mouse? No, it's too heavy for a mouse. You know, I'm going through all the physical things what could be on my bed. And as my brain is just going 90 miles an hour, running through the Rolodex of possibilities that are all coming up, not that. And all of a sudden there was contact. And there was sort of a wave of calm that followed it. And I stopped breathing so hard. And it says, "Now you can open your eyes." And I almost wanted to pass out again. Here I am, my eyes finally open, and I can peripherally see my room around me in the ambient light. I always had light on in the house. I'm looking at this thing, and the first thing that I can get to even come to my mind is, Jesus Christ, you look like a fucking bug. Having had that experience and having it just mark me so, having it brand me like that, my life will never be the same.
After that initial experience, for the next several nights, I remember just being kind of freaked out and like, what was that? Like, that was the strangest experience I ever had. Like, what was that about? And just kind of going about, our daily lives, going back to managing the hotel. And I think it was a few weeks later, it might have been 2 or 3 weeks later. It didn't seem like a long period of time, but within a few weeks' time, I remember lying in bed again and waking up, being startled, and feeling something at the side of the bed, and being totally terrified and trying to wake Jamie up, and Jamie couldn't wake up, and feeling some kind of energy go into my lower spine, and it felt like it was just sucking the life out of me. And then passing out again and waking up in the morning, waking up with marks behind my ears, behind my ear, and again being very shaken emotionally about what my experience was the night before.
I had enrolled in graduate school back here in Boston, and Peter was at acupuncture school. So again, we had come back here to plan a way to work together. I mean, everything was in service of our looking at our lives vocationally together.
Sammy, you're up coordinated.
I know.
It was probably in the middle of my second year, 3-year training at the New England School of Acupuncture. One of my classmates was telling the story of how he was working at Cambridge City Hospital as an administrative assistant, and there was this psychiatrist there who was working with people who thought they'd been abducted by aliens.
I think it's a combination of adventurousness. I'm always looking for excitement, adventure, and a certain naivete. In other words, I don't always see the minefields.
I think he is intelligent, highly intelligent. I think he's very gifted. He writes very well. Won a Pulitzer Prize for writing a very good book. You can't be chopped liver and get to be a professor of psychiatry at Harvard. You have to be very good. And he has, I think, jeopardized his reputation among a lot of serious-minded people for behaving the way he has.
Carl Sagan says gratuitously, on the basis of nothing, this is hallucinations, and even wrote an article on that. He didn't do any work. I mean, what does he know about hallucinations anyway, you know?
In 1989, a psychologist asked me if I wanted to meet Bud Hopkins. And I said, well, who's he? And she said, well, he's an artist in New York City who works with people who have had the experience of being abducted by aliens. I said, come on, give me a break. You know, you believe this? He told me about people from all over the country who didn't know each other, who were reporting virtually the same story. I mean, I'm a clinical psychiatrist, so I work with data. Your data is the people you're working with. That data operated like sulfuric acid to my worldview. I mean, it just didn't compute at all. I mean, my smart-ass mind couldn't do anything with that. Then he asked me if I wanted to see them myself in Boston, as part of my practice. And I don't know how much I hesitated about that. I mean, I don't remember. I think I was agreed to it pretty readily, but I sort of knew I was embarking on something. And then they began to come.
It was pouring rain that day. It was just really pouring. Anyway, we went into John's office, and I remember specifically, we go into this regular hospital, and, we introduced ourselves to John, took some basic information about us. He turned to Peter and said, "So, do you want to tell me what happened?" I can remember John going, "Just lean back," just like that. So Peter leaned back, and John asked him, one question. Something like, "Why don't you tell me what happened to you, Peter?" And the next thing I know, Peter closes his eyes and just starts crying.
And I had this well of emotions come boiling out of me. And this was, I had gone there just out of curiosity. And I was hoping John would tell me, "Oh, these are just, dreams, nightmares." I in my wildest dreams, I never thought that I would walk in there and walk out of there thinking, "Oh my God, I have to possibly think that I've had contact with aliens."
I learned about Karen around the early August of 1996. She wrote a letter to me. She said, "Not only are we not alone, but we're really not alone." And I like that. Karen's life was, and where she would go, was regulated by what she calls pops. And she would get a pop, which would mean suddenly she would decide to leave wherever she was and go somewhere else. It's kind of a mixture of impulsivity and intuitiveness.
And within a month or two, I was in Boston, and then that's when my relationship with John began. Pretty quickly got into working with the experiences, and all of my sessions, probably almost without fail, were really, really intense.
She has a remarkable capacity to look at herself, to face head-on her experiences, her emotions, and move through them, if you help her.
And he asked me, "When was the first time that you made contact with these beings?" And my brain went all the way back to when I was this little kid. I think I was about 2.5 years old. My mom had presented me with a new bubblegum machine, and I loved it. I was playing by a dry creek bed that was just next to the house, all by myself with a bubblegum machine. And there was a little being that was sticking out from behind a tree with really large black eyes that wanted to ask me a question. Would I be willing to go with him? I said, "Sure." And we got into this sort of egg-shaped thing, and I looked up to see this other being coming in with a little boy that he was leading by the hand. And the little boy seemed to be older than I was by a couple of years. And the being with the little boy walked him up to just in front of me. And I was asked if I would be willing to share my bubblegum machine with him. And I said, "Sure." And I handed it over. And I think that we were being introduced for the first time. I don't remember too much more after that we were separated. And when the egg opened again, I was back in by the creek bed. The very next thing I remembered was as if there had been no cut in the frame. Was all of a sudden I was mid-stride running in toward the house. And I couldn't find my bubblegum machine.
So I went back out and we looked for it, and we just couldn't find it anywhere around on the edge of the creek or whatever. I was kind of clueless. All I knew is it was really gone.
The very first regression session where I laid on the table or laid on the bed, and John counted me back from 10 to 1 and asked me to do some deep breathing relaxation, and then asked me to go into the memories again and see what else was there.
Journey into the unknown. Let's see where it goes.
sitting in my bed, and the beings are outside. It's outside my window. They're standing there, they're watching me. It's time for me to go. Light comes down, surrounds us, and we just float up.
Mm-hmm. Where are you?
I'm in the ship.
You're in the ship. Mm-hmm.
And John, I have this feeling that I'm avoiding something that's really on the surface.
Mm.
And my mind is racing around all these things.
Okay, so...
And that there's something else that needs to come out.
Okay, so just let it be. Don't try to figure it out. Just let your body sink. Let the breathing take over. Just notice go back into your feelings, into your emotions.
Okay, I'm getting closer to
your
fear.
sensations. Okay, let the fear, just let it be there. Let it come. That's it.
You can't do this to me. I want to say no, you can't do this to me.
Let it come. Give it voice.
Just can't do this to me anymore.
That's it.
Stop it!
That's it.
I'm so tired of it. Just do this anytime you want. Oh.
That's it. What's happening?
They're taking me. They're taking my semen.
Where are you?
I'm laying on a table. They have control over me. I'm just laying here. They're taking me. They're taking. They have control over my genitals. They have control over me. They have a cup over me. They're just taking me. They're just.
Let the feelings come. That's it. Mm-hmm. What's the emotion that went with that experience? What are the emotions that went with that? Give it voice. That's it.
Fuck you.
That's it.
Just fuck you.
That's it.
They're just happy now. They just got what they wanted.
Here I am studying psychology, so I'm thinking about early childhood development, I'm thinking about childhood trauma, I'm thinking about birth trauma.
I begged John and, my therapist, tell me there was something, tell me there's a reason for me to have these experiences. Tell me I was abused as a kid. Tell me, there's a reason here for me to create all this fantasy.
I'd come home and I'd say, Peter, you know what I just realized? Your mother's from England. And he'd say yes, and I'd say, but you know what? She has a green card, right? And he'd say yes, and I said, so she's an alien, right?
John was really upfront. You don't have to do this. I'm here if you want to explore this. I'll work with you through this. And it was at that place where I just knew I had to do it to put my own demons to rest.
I exhausted the psychological, then I went to the spiritual. And then I was into, it's really a manifestation of the divine. You really, really the aliens maybe you have to say that they're alien, but maybe it's really God, so there was a lot of different theories. I tried everything. But most of them were to comfort me,
By the time I published a book in 1994, I'd seen, I don't know how many, between 50 and 100 cases, and felt on pretty solid ground that this was not going to give way to some sort of conventional explanation. I was just behaving like clinicians should behave, I think. Here's what I'm finding, recording the cases, writing them up, saying what they said, and what, if this is true, what it implies, and that I was a bit surprised actually by the storm that the first book created.
Is alien abduction real?
In the crossfire, Harvard psychiatry professor Dr. John Mack, author of Abduction.
This Harvard psychiatrist is a believer.
I was asked by the dean of the Harvard Medical School to be chair of an ad hoc committee to look into John's activities.
Next, people who believe they've had encounters with aliens and a
all of the articles and all the publicity that he was getting identified him as a professor at the Harvard Medical School and implied that the Harvard Medical School was somehow sponsoring what he was doing. And the dean wanted to know, what is he doing? And does it fit within the broad framework of what a Harvard Medical School faculty person should do?
I sensed that I ought to try to get ahead of the curve on the high exposure that I had, but I was too late. They were putting together a 3-person committee to look into the work and see if I had maintained the standards of the Harvard Medical School, because questions had been raised. That's the way it was put. If I just said that this was a new psychiatric syndrome that we hadn't found the cause of it, that would have been okay.
There is an establishment at Harvard. We know the boundaries. Theology is okay, but extraterrestrials, no. Angels, yes. Extraterrestrials, no. That's the kind of boundary. There's a lot of harumphing that goes on. Well, we don't really want to be identified with this kind of science. It's okay to be identified with other bizarre views that might emanate, but we have our limits too.
Hiya.
Hey, what's it like out there?
What?
What's it like out there?
Oh, cold and wet.
Well, I want to say something to you here which is very important to me. I say it and I say it and I say it, and it sometimes doesn't get regarded. But what basically changed me was my clinical experience. As a clinician, I couldn't account for this in any way with anything I had learned. And, I was stuck with this dilemma. What do you do then? Somebody comes to you and they tell you that something's happened to them, and they tell it sincerely. They seem to be a healthy person otherwise, not given to delusion or make-believe or anything else. Their family says they've always been very solid and blah, blah, blah. What do you do at that point? Do you say, well, I'm sorry, there's got to be some kind of mental illness I never heard of before, because with no indications of that? Or do you say, well, it's like it's happening. Maybe what I thought was possible wasn't complete. It seems to me it's clinically and humanly more honest to say there's something I don't know here, and to follow your clinical instincts.
He says that he believed the stories, and I'm paraphrasing, but essentially he says that he believed the stories if they were offered with what appeared to be a great deal of sincerity, if the experiencer felt them to be true. And that assumes that people are never delusional. That assumes that people never lie convincingly. That assumes that people aren't mistaken in the way they remember or interpret their own experiences. There are a lot of assumptions built into that.
My point of view is that there must be something truthful about this. To say it's not true increasingly weakens the value of human testimony. Given that so much of history relies on personal testimony, Christianity is then put into question, because it too is based on personal testimony. Otherwise, it would be a stupid faith.
Stupid.
I feel like I'm walking around in life with a dual identity. That I have a very human consciousness, normal and earth-based, running around inside of my body just like everybody else. It's just another part of my consciousness that, feels